The air on Virex 9 wasn't breathable by human standards, but it shimmered in a way that made it look like it was always about to burst into flame. Kael Zarn adjusted the seal on his rebreather and squinted across the jagged obsidian field. The black stones jutted out like broken teeth, and beyond them, the half-shattered spires of the Cult of Drexx loomed against a swollen red sky. "Any idea how many are in there?" Kael asked, not turning to the translator drone hovering beside him. "Unknown," the drone buzzed, "but scans suggest no fewer than 90 individuals. All armed, all fanatical." Kael sighed and stepped forward, boots crunching on razor-sharp gravel. "Perfect. Remind me why Command thought it was a good idea to send one guy with a guitar and a translator bot. Because 52 armed units have already failed to establish diplomatic contact, and your file says you're unconventional." "Unconventional, right." He shifted the instrument case on his back. "Next time, tell them to send someone with a tank." The cult's outer perimeter was marked by red slag pillars, each draped with strips of flayed something. Kael didn't ask what. 2 guards stepped forward, both tall and armored in rusted plates welded together with bones. One of them raised a curved blade but hesitated when Kael raised both hands. "I'm not armed," Kael said, "unless you count music." The second guard tilted his head, his eyes were recessed, glowing faintly purple. "You are the human," he rasped. "Yes, Kael, diplomatic envoy." "I bring no weapons, just a message." The first guard snorted. "Your predecessors brought messages, we fed their bones to the mouth." Kael cocked his head. "That's charming, I still want an audience." The guards exchanged a look, then with a grunt the first one stepped aside. "You walk into the void of your own will, so be it." Inside the spire complex, it was colder. The black stone absorbed heat so efficiently that even Kael's insulated suit began registering a temperature drop. The air smelled metallic, and the low thrum of chanting echoed from deep within the walls. They led him through corridors etched with spiraling symbols and past rooms filled with kneeling cultists. None of them looked up. They chanted in a language that the drone couldn't translate. At the heart of the structure, they reached a chamber pulsing with red light. At the center sat a throne carved from fused skulls, and on it lounged a being twice Kael's height, wrapped in crimson robes. Its skin was a patchwork of burns and ceremonial scarring, and its eyes gleamed under a metal crown shaped like a screaming face. "Envoy," the thing said, voice a low rumble. "You stand before Vorak, mouth of the void and prophet of Drexx. Speak your final words." Kael took a breath. "I'm not here to die, I'm here to talk." Vorak rose, robes dragging behind him. "You come here alone carrying a box, the last envoy did the same." "We melted him into the altar." Kael unhooked the guitar case from his back. "This isn't a weapon, it's an instrument." Vorak stepped closer, his breath reeked of sulfur. "You think to sing at us, creature?" "We have torn the lungs from planets that whispered of peace." Kael's fingers trembled as he opened the case. The guitar was old, wood-worn smooth, frets polished by years of use. He'd played it during the siege of Malker, in the ruins of Earth's embassies on Titan, and once while floating through a radiation storm in a broken shuttle. This was different. This was madness. He strummed once. The sound rang out, sharp and clear, echoing strangely in the chamber. One of the cultists hissed. Vorak narrowed his eyes. "What is that melody?" Vorak asked. "Something old," Kael said, adjusting his grip. "Something human." He began to play. The song wasn't one he'd planned. It came from deep memory, something his mother used to hum while fixing the roof during summer storms. The chords were simple, the tune slow and aching. As he played, the chanting faltered. One by one, the cultists turned toward him. Their eyes widened, some staggered. Vorak raised a hand but didn't speak. Kael sang. His voice was rough, not beautiful, but it carried. The words were nonsense syllables, half lyrics and half lament. He poured every bitter hour of loneliness, fear, hope, and stubborn joy into the sound. His fingers ached on the strings. His throat cracked. Still, he kept going. The room changed. The red light dimmed. The oppressive weight in the air lifted. The stone underfoot no longer felt like it was absorbing life. Something ancient stirred in the cultists, something that had been buried beneath blood and dogma. Virex stumbled back. That sound, it pierces the veil. Kael kept singing. One of the cultists dropped his blade. Then another. A woman tore off her face wrappings, revealing tears streaming down her gray cheeks. Kael hit the final chord and let it ring. Silence followed. Real silence. No chanting, no growling, just breathe and stillness. Virex fell to his knees. We heard the void, he whispered. But this was not the void, this was light. Kael lowered the guitar. That's what we do, humans, we find the darkest place and shine something into it. Virex looked up. We worshipped Drexx for 10,000 cycles. We burned the weak, we sacrificed the willing. We believed the void would grant us strength. Kael nodded. And what did it give you? Emptiness. One of the cultists, a boy barely taller than the guitar, stepped forward. What was that thing you sang? Kael knelt. Something from home, a lullaby. The boy blinked. We were never sung to. Kael looked around. The cultists were no longer standing in formation. Some sat. One woman held a child. Another stared at her hands like she'd never seen them before. Virex rose slowly. His crown fell from his head and cracked on the stone. We cannot go back, he said. I'm not asking you to, Kael replied. The drone buzzed nervously. Kael, we're receiving a transmission. Command wants to know if the cult has been neutralized. Kael looked at the room. Tell them no gods were slain, but something changed. Virex turned to the altar once used for sacrifices. He touched it gently. We gave everything to Drexx, and he never sang back. Kael packed his guitar. No, but now you know how it feels. He walked out of the chamber. No one stopped him. Some followed. The guards at the gate stepped aside. Outside, the air still shimmered, but it no longer looked like it wanted to burn. As he reached the edge of the obsidian field, Kael turned back. Virex stood under the sky, robes fluttering. For the first time, he looked old. Not in years, but in weight. Will we find another god? Virex called. Kael shrugged. Maybe, but next time, pick one that listens. He tapped the drone. Let's go. As they lifted off, the cultists began dismantling the red pillars. Someone started humming the lullaby. Out of tune, off-key, but real. In the silence of the void, something had answered. And it had come from a man with a guitar. The shuttle's atmospheric seals hissed as Kael peeled off his pressure suit, revealing a sweat-darkened shirt beneath. He dropped the gear into the decon bin, stretched his arms overhead, and let out a groan that sounded like it had been building since the last war. The pilot, a wiry woman with a tattoo of a shrimp wielding dual plasma pistols on her neck, glanced back from the cockpit. So, you convert a death cult or just throw glitter at them? Kael slumped into the seat behind her and rubbed his temples. Neither, I played them a lullaby. She blinked twice. That's not sarcasm. Nope. Well, I guess I can stop calling you dead man walking in the flight log. Appreciated. The shuttle banked hard, angling toward the orbital station hanging over Virex 9 like a rusted chandelier. The hull creaked in protest. Kael shut his eyes. He could still feel the weight of that chamber. The silence after the final chord. The way their eyes had changed. When the docking clamps engaged, the pilot stood and slapped a medkit into his lap. You've got dried blood behind your ears. Might want to check your pressure cap valves. Kael peeled back his collar. The skin on his neck was mottled with burst vessels. Great, another souvenir. The station's corridor smelled like ozone and recirculated sweat. A security drone glided past, its lens tracking him without comment. He turned down a side hall toward the temporary envoy quarters. The walls here were lined with impact foam cheap stuff, the kind that off-gassed carcinogens when the filters failed. Inside, the lights flickered once before stabilizing. He dropped the medkit on the table and opened it with one hand while stripping off his shirt with the other. The mirror above the sink was cracked but serviceable. He leaned in. His pupils reacted unevenly, probably mild hypoxia, maybe worse. The door chimed. He ignored it. The knock came next 3 sharp raps, followed by one slower. Standard code for non-hostile personnel. He opened it. Standing there was a being that barely fit in the human section of the station. 7 feet of sinew and iridescent chitin with a cranial ridge that glowed faintly in dim light. "Ambassador Drexx," Kael said, stepping aside. "Haven't seen you since the incident on Enceladus." "You sang," Drexx said, ducking through the doorway with a clicking grace. "They recorded it." Kael didn't answer. He dipped a cotton swab into antiseptic and dabbed the bruised skin beneath his collarbone. "They call it the sound that unveils. That wasn't what I called it. They are dismantling their altars. Virex has issued a declaration. No more sacrifices, no more silence. They've turned their prayer chambers into listening halls." Kael dropped the swab into the disposal chute. "That's their business now." Drexx studied him with unblinking eyes that glimmered like oil on water. "They are not a people known for mercy." "How did you fracture their core mythos with a melody?" Kael picked up a dermal regenerator and ran it along a split on his forearm. "I didn't fracture it. I reminded them they were alive." Drexx tilted his head. "You risked exposure to Drexxian sonic anomalies, walked into a liturgical death zone, and played a stringed device associated with pre-fusion agricultural rituals. It's a guitar. We analyzed the composition. It contains no strategic encryption, no subliminal frequencies. It is structurally simple." Kael leaned against the table. "So is grief." Drexx made a low humming sound. "My people once believed our ancestors whispered through the static of dying stars. We stopped listening when none ever answered. You humans never stopped speaking to the void, even when it ignored you." Kael pulled a thermal blanket over his shoulders and sat on the edge of the bed. "Because sometimes we answer ourselves." Drexx crouched, folding his limbs like a collapsing scaffold. "Virex wishes to meet again. In neutral orbit, he says there is more to learn. I'm not a teacher, you are now." Kael let his head fall back against the wall. "If he really wants to talk, he can dock at Platform Echo. I'm not going back down there." Drexx rose, moving with unsettling silence. "He will come. And he will bring others." As the ambassador left, Kael exhaled slowly. His fingers twitched, as if still playing phantom notes. 3 days later, Platform Echo buzzed with the kind of traffic it hadn't seen in decades. Freighter crews stared warily at the Drexxian shuttle as it latched onto the outer ring. Emergency protocols had been triggered twice already when cultists wandered into restricted zones, asking about the man who sang. Kael stood in the observation deck, arms crossed, watching them disembark. Virex was at the front, no longer wearing ceremonial robes. His skin looked less inflamed, his gait more uncertain. Behind him came 5 others, all marked but unarmed. Kael didn't go down to meet them. Instead, he waited until they found him. Virex entered the deck quietly, as though the space itself required reverence. He approached Kael, stopping short of arm's reach. "We are not what we were," he said. "You will be something else. That's how it works. We have begun cataloging other human music. There is a piece called Freebird. It contains many solos." Kael raised an eyebrow. "That's one way to start." Virex's eyes narrowed. "You must understand, we did not feel sorrow before. We felt obedience. Dissonance was punished, but now we feel frayed. Open? That's normal. It is not comfortable. Neither is growing." Virex turned to the viewport, gazing out at the curve of Virex 9. "We once believed the universe devoured weakness. Now we wonder if it might be waiting for something else." Kael didn't respond. He watched a cargo hauler drift past, trailing a tether line behind it like a forgotten thought. "Some of my followers are frightened," Virex said. "They want to return to certainty. They can't. Why not? Because you heard it. You can't unhear it." Virex's throat clicked. "One of the younglings painted a mural in our old shrine. It shows you with no face holding the sun in your hands." Kael chuckled. "Tell them I prefer coffee." "We do not know what that is." "You will." A silence settled then, not awkward but full. Virex's second in command, a pale creature with spiral tattoos on her jaw, stepped forward. "You have altered our trajectory." Kael nodded toward the viewport. "So have a few asteroids." She blinked slowly. Do you intend to sing again? Probably, but not here. I've got another mission. Vorac's gaze sharpened. Where? Kael pulled a small data slate from his pocket and handed it over. There's a mining colony on Kessik Prime, got hit with an echo plague, communications dropped. No one's heard from them in 6 months. That is not a musical problem. It is if no one's listening. Vorax studied the slate. You will go alone again, Kael shrugged. They keep sending teams keep disappearing. Might as well try something stupid. The second in command touched her jaw. We will send one of ours, not to protect, to observe, Kael didn't argue. Fine. But they carry gear, not weapons, and they don't chant in confined spaces. Agreed. Vorax turned to leave, then paused. The void still calls, but now we think it may be asking questions. Kael watched him go. Then let's give it some answers. Later that night, Kael sat in the dim light of his quarters, tuning his guitar. His fingers still ached, but the strings hummed true. Outside, the stars turned slowly, silent and waiting. The first time Kael saw the Kessik Prime atmosphere through the viewport, he coughed involuntarily. Not because it was toxic, though it certainly was, but because even the filtered light looked like it had been dragged through a coal mine, doused in oil, and set on fire just for the mood. Thickest particulate layer I've ever charted, the Drexxian observer said from behind him. Her name, loosely translated to standard, was Vel. She had 4 eyes that blinked out of sync and skin that shimmered like scorched glass. You humans always land in places that look like they're trying to digest you. I've got a type, Kael muttered, adjusting the strap of the respirator mask that already pinched at his cheekbone. You sure you're cleared for this level of exposure? I rewired my exo lungs this morning. I'll be fine. Kael gave her a long look. That's not reassuring. Neither was your lullaby, and yet here I am. The shuttle rattled as it descended through the soot-choked stratosphere. Visibility dropped to almost nothing until the landing struts kissed soil, or what passed for soil on a mining moon that hadn't seen an unfiltered sunbeam in generations. The moment the ramp dropped, Kael's boots hit the ground with a crunch that sounded like stepping on old bones. Kessik Prime's mining outpost was a half-collapsed sprawl of modular structures, most buried under layers of ash and slag. No lights, no movement, no welcome party. Vel scanned the horizon with a handheld device that resembled a melted tuning fork. No electromagnetic signals, no heat signatures. No sound. Nothing's ever actually silent, Kael said, pulling his guitar case from the cargo rack. It just means you're not listening right. They moved through the perimeter slowly. Past storage units buckled from internal pressure failures, and a broken loader mech slumped against a wall like it had given up mid-task. The smell was sharp ozone, rust, and something under it that clung to the sinuses like mold made of grief. Kael crouched beside a shattered helmet half buried in dust. No blood, no bodies. Maybe they left, Vel said. Kael pointed to the collapsed comms tower, its transmission dish twisted into a spiral. Not without calling for help, and not in a hurry. Inside the central habitat dome, the temperature dropped 5 degrees in under a minute. The environmental systems were offline, but the interior was intact. Tables still set for meals. A cup of something fossilized mid-sip. A game board left mid-match. No signs of panic. It's like they all just stood up and walked out. Vel's voice was quieter now. Kael set the guitar case down beside a bench and removed his mask. The air tasted like burnt copper and old secrets. He ran a hand along the back of his neck, checking for pressure variance. Nothing abnormal, but the weight in the room was wrong. There was a sound barely. A low vibration, more felt than heard. He walked toward it through a narrow hallway, past quarters left untouched. Then, down in the sub-level maintenance corridor, he found the source. A mining drone still active, its torso ripped open, wires exposed like nerves. But it was humming. Not an error code, in tune. Kael leaned in. Vel. You hearing this? She knelt beside him, her head tilted. It's harmonic, but not mechanical. Someone's modified the feedback loop. He traced a wire into the wall and followed it to an auxiliary relay board. The wiring wasn't standard. It had been repatched with what looked like scraps of guitar string. Vel's pupils dilated. This isn't Drexxian tech, and it's not Kessik manufacture either. Kael opened his case and pulled out the guitar. He strummed a chord soft. The drone's hum shifted, matching the tone. Another chord and the hum followed. "It's responding to music," he whispered. Vel tapped a sequence into her scanner. "There's a signal embedded in the resonance. It's a pattern, not language." But it's deliberate. They spent the next 3 hours tracing the signal through the facility, following nodes that had been jury-rigged into a kind of tonal relay. It led them to the mine shaft, a yawning black throat of a tunnel that dropped straight into the moon's crust. Kael hesitated at the edge. "You ever get that feeling like someone's inviting you to your own funeral?" Vel lowered herself onto the ladder. "You humans always say that like it's a bad thing." The descent took 20 minutes. The shaft walls were lined with scorched rock and mineral veins that glowed faintly as they passed. At the bottom, the tunnel opened into a cavern laced with crystal formations that pulsed in response to their footsteps. Kael adjusted his grip on the guitar. "This isn't natural." "No." "It's tuned." In the center of the chamber stood a figure, human. Barely. His skin was mottled, his eyes unfocused. He stood barefoot on a platform made of shattered comms equipment, and as they approached, his mouth moved silently. Kael stepped forward. "You're from the colony." The man didn't react, just kept mouthing something over and over. Vel scanned him. He's alive, neural activities high but disorganized, like he's running every memory at once. Kael looked around. The crystals were vibrating subtly but in rhythm. They weren't reflecting sound, they were amplifying it. "He's caught in a loop," Kael said, "and this whole chamber is feeding it back to him, like an echo chamber built from his own thoughts." Vel crouched. "This isn't just auditory, it's emotional resonance. The colony didn't vanish. It fractured." Kael knelt beside the man and set the guitar across his knees. "Then maybe we can pull him out." He played not the lullaby this time, but something else. Raw chords, unstructured, a melody without form, a question, not a statement. The crystals shifted, their glow dimming, then rising again. The man blinked. His lips stopped moving. Vel watched the walls. "It's working." Kael changed key, letting the notes wander, stumble, then rise. He played uncertainty. Hope that wasn't sure it belonged. The man's breathing slowed. He turned his head. "Where are they?" he whispered. "They're here," Kael said, "just lost in the noise." The man looked past them toward the cavern walls. "We tried to get out. Everything we said came back wrong, like shouting into a mirror." Kael kept playing, softer now. The resonance in the crystals faded. One by one, flickers of movement stirred in the shadows others. Human shapes blinking, stumbling forward, not ghosts, survivors. Vel stood. They've been trapped in a feedback state. The emotional energy of their fear looped back into the environment. They couldn't escape because they couldn't stop hearing themselves. Kael ended the song on a minor chord. The silence that followed was warm, not empty. The survivors gathered slowly, many of them dazed, some weeping. One woman took Kael's hand and pressed it to her temple, as if grounding herself. Hours later, topside, the evac crew arrived. Medics swarmed, administering fluids, stabilizers, neural dampeners. Kael sat on a crate, letting a technician patch a tear in his arm where the ladder had scraped him raw. "Vitals are within range," the medic said, "but your blood pressure's low and your cortisol's peaking. Give me salt and a nap, I'll be fine." Vel sat beside him, her posture unusually still. "You didn't break the loop with logic. You broke it with uncertainty." Kael looked at the horizon, where the sky had lightened by a single shade. "Sometimes the only way out is through the noise." She handed him a data stick. "We recorded everything. Drexxian archives will study this for generations. Just don't turn it into a religion." Vel tilted her head. "We already had one. It didn't end well." They watched the last of the survivors board the evac shuttle. Kael's guitar case sat unopened beside him. For the first time in days, he didn't feel the urge to play. Vel stood. You always carry that thing, even when you're bleeding or exhausted. Kael leaned back. It's not for me. Then who? He looked up at the sky. Anyone who forgot what silence really sounds like. There was no ceremony. No applause, just a shuttle lifting into orbit and a moon left quieter than before. That was enough.